Hello and welcome to this reading of Geographica by Strabo. I hope to show you that Homer was the first geographer, and as everyone knows, the successors of Homer in geography were also notable men and familiar with philosophy. Eratosthenes declares that the first two successors of Homer were Anaximander, a pupil and fellow citizen of Thales, and Hectorus of Miletus, that Anaximander was the first to publish a geographical map, and that Hectorus left behind him a work on geography. A work believed to be by his reason of its similarity to his other writings. Assuredly, however, there is need of encyclopedic learning for the study of geography, as many men have already stated, and Hippocrates so too. In his treatise Against Eratosthenes correctly shows that it is possible for any man, whether layman or scholar, to attain the requisite knowledge of geography without the determination of the heavenly bodies or the ellipses which have been observed. For instance, it is impossible to determine whether Alexandria in Egypt is north or south of Babylon, or how much north or south of Babylon it is, without investigation through the means of climate. In like manner, we cannot accurately fix points that lie at varying distance from us, whether to the east or the west, except by a comparison of the eclipses of the sun and the moon. That, then, is what Hippocrates says on the subject. All those who undertake to describe the distinguishing features of countries denote special attention to astronomy and geometry, in explaining the matters of shape, of size, of distances between points, and of climate, as well as all matters of heat and cold, and in general the peculiarities of the atmosphere. Indeed, an architect in constructing a house, or an engineer in founding a city, would make provision for all of these conditions, and all the more would they be considered by the man whose purview embraced the whole inhabited world, for they concern him more than anyone else. Within the area of small countries, it involves no great discrepancy if a given place be situated more towards the south or more towards the north. But when the area is that of the whole round of the inhabited world, the north extends to the remote confines of Scythia and Celtia, and the south to the remote confines of Ethiopia, and the difference between those two extremes is very great. The same thing holds true also as regard a man's living in India or Iberia. The one country is in the far east, and the other is in the far west. Indeed, they are in a sense the antipodes of each other, as we know. Everything of this kind, since it is caused by the movement of the sun, and the other stars as well as by their tendency towards the centre, compels us to look to the vault of heaven, and to observe the phenomena of heavenly bodies, peculiar to our individual positions. And in these phenomena we see very great variations in the positions of inhabited places. So if one is about to treat of the differences between countries, how can he discuss his subject correctly and adequately if he has paid no attention, ever superficially, to any of these matters? For even if it is impossible in a treatise of this nature, because of its having a greater bearing on affairs of state, to make everything scientifically accurate, it will naturally be appropriate to do so, at least in so far as the man in public life is able to follow the thought. Moreover, the man who has once thus lifted his thoughts to the heavens will surely not hold aloof from the earth as a whole, for it is obviously absurd if a man who desired to give a clear exposition of the inhabited world had ventured to lay hold of the celestial bodies, and to use them for the purposes of instruction, and yet had paid no attention to the earth as a whole, of which the inhabited world is but a part, neither as to its size, nor its character, nor its position in the universe, nor even the world is inhabited, only in the part in which we live, or in a number of parts, and if so, how many such parts there are, and likewise how large the uninhabited part is, and what its nature is, and why it is uninhabited. It seems, then, that the special branch of geography represents a union of meteorology and geometry, since it unites the terrestrial and celestial phenomena as being very closely related, and in no sense separated from each other, as heaven is high above the earth. Well then, to this encyclopedic knowledge, let us add terrestrial history. That is, the history of animals and plants and everything useful or harmful that is produced by the land or the sea. This definition will, I think, make clear what I mean by terrestrial history. In fact, all such studies are important as preliminary helps towards complete understanding. And to this knowledge of nature of the land and of the species of animals and plants, we must add a knowledge of all that pertains to the sea, for in a sense we are amphibious, and belong no more to the land than to the sea, that the benefit is great to anyone who has become possessed of information of this character. It is evidence both from ancient traditions and from reason. At any rate, the poets declare that the wisest heroes were those who visited many places and roamed over the world, for the poets regard it as a great achievement to have seen the cities and known the minds of many men. Nestor boasts of having lived among the Lapitae, to whom he had gone as an invited guest from a distant land afar, for of themselves they summoned me. Menelaus, too, makes a similar boast when he says, I roamed over Cyprus and Phoenicia and Egypt, and came to Ethiopians and Sidonians and Embrians and Libya. And at this point he added the distinctive peculiarity of the country, where lambs are horned from the birth, for there the ewes earn thrice a year, full of a circle. And in speaking of Thebes and Egypt, he says that Egypt is a country where earth, the grain-giver, yields herbs in plenty. And again he says, Thebes of 100 gates went sally forth 200 warriors through each, with horses and chariots. And doubtless it was because of Hercules' wide experience and information that Homer speaks of him as a man who had knowledge of great adventures. And my contention, made at the outset, is supported by reason as well as by ancient tradition. And the other argument, it seems to me, is adjudicated with especial force in reference to present-day conditions, namely that the greater part of geography subserves the need of states, for the scene of activities of states is land and sea, the dwelling place of man. The scene is small when the activities are of small importance, and large when they are large in importance. And the largest is the scene that embraces all the rest, which we call by the special name of the inhabited world. And this, therefore, would be by the scene of activities of the largest importance. Moreover, the greatest generals are without exception men who are able to hold sway over land and sea, and to unite nations and cities under one government and political administration. It is important, therefore, plain, that geography as a whole has a direct bearing upon the activities of commanders, for it describes the continents and seas, not only the seas inside the limits of the whole inhabited world, but also those outside these limits. and the description which geography gives is of importance to these men who are concerned as to whether this or that is so or otherwise, and whether known or unknown. For thus they can manage their various affairs in a more satisfactory manner, if they know how large a country is, how it lies, and what are its peculiarities of sky or soil. But because different kings rule in different quarters of the world, and carry their activities from different centres and starting points, and keep extending the borders of their empires, it is impossible either for them or for geographers to be equally familiar with all the parts of the world. Nay, the phrase more or less is a fault much in evidence in kings and geographers. For even if the whole world inhabited formed one empire or state, it would hardly follow that all parts of that empire would be equally well known. No, it would not be true even in that case, but the nearer regions would be better known, and it would be quite proper to describe these regions in greater detail in order to make them known, for they are nearer to the needs of the state. Therefore it would not be remarkable even if one person were a proper choreographer for the Indians, another for the Ethiopians, and still another for the Greeks and the Romans. For example, wherein would it be proper for the Indian geographer to add details about Boeotia, such as Homer gives? These were they that dwelt in Hyria and rocky Alus, and Sinicus and Salclus. For me these details are proper, but when I am to come to treat India, it is no longer proper to add such details, and in fact, utility does not urge it, and utility above all things is our standard in empirical matters of this kind. The utility of geography in matters of small concern also is quite evident. For instance, in hunting. A hunter will be more successful in the chase if he knows the character and extent of the forest. And again, only one who knows a region can advantageously pitch camp there, or set an ambush, or direct a march. The utility of geography is more conspicuous, however, in great undertakings, in proportion as the prizes of knowledge and the disasters that result from ignorance are greater. Thus Agamemnon and his fleet ravaged Mysia in the belief that it was Troyland, and came back home in disgrace, and too the Persians and the Libyans, summarizing that the straits were blind alleys, not only came near great perils, but they left behind them memorials of their folly. For the Persians raised the tomb of Epirus near Chalcis in honor of Selgius, whom they executed in the belief that he had treacherously conducted their fleet from the Gulf of Malus to Euphrates. And the Libyans erected the monument in honor of Pelorus, whom they put to death for a similar reason. And Greece was covered with wrecks of vessels on the occasion of the expedition of Xerxes. And again, the colonies sent out by the Elonians and the Ionians have furnished many examples of similar blunders. There have also been cases of success, in which success was due to acquaintance with the regions involved. For instance, at the pass of Thermopylae, it is said that Euphrates, by showing the Persians the pathway across the mountains, put Leonidas and his troops at their mercy, and brought the Persians south of Thermopylae. But leaving antiquity, I believe that the modern campaign of the Romans against the Parthians is a sufficient proof of what I say, and likewise that against the Germans and the Celts. For in the latter case, the barbarians carried on a guerrilla warfare in swamps, in pathless forests, and in deserts, and they made the ignorant Romans believe to be far away from what was really near at hand, and kept them in ignorance of the roads and of the facilities for procuring provisions and other necessities. Now, just as the greater part of geography, as I have said, has a bearing on the life and the needs of rulers, so also does the greater part of the theory of ethics and the theory of politics have a bearing on the life of rulers, and the proof of this is the fact that we distinguish the differences between the constituents of states by the sovereignties in those states, in that we call one sovereignty the monarchy or kingship, another the aristocracy, and still another the democracy. And we have a corresponding number of constitutions of states which we designate by name of the sovereignties, because it is from these that they derive the fundamental principle of their specific nature. For in one country, the will of the king is law, and in another country, the will of those of highest rank, and in another, the will of the people. It is the law that gives the type and the form of the constitution, and for that reason, some have defined justice as the interest of the more powerful. If then political philosophers deal chiefly with the rulers, and if geography supplies the needs of those rulers, then geography would seem to have some advantage over political science. This advantage, however, has to do with practice. And yet a work on geography also involves the theory of known mean value, the theory of arts, the theory of mathematics, and of natural science, and as well the theory which lies in the fields of history and myths. Though myths have nothing to do with practice, for instance, if a man should tell the story of the wanderings of Odysseus, or of Menelaus, or of Jason, it would not be thought to be that he was making any contribution to the practical wisdom of his hearers, and that it is what the man of affairs demands, unless he should insert the useful lessons to be drawn from the hardships those heroes underwent. Still, he would be providing no mean entertainment for the hero who takes an interest in the regions which furnish the scenes of myths. Men of affairs are fond of just such entertainment, because the localities are famous and the myths are charming. But they care for no great amount of it, since they are more interested in what is useful, and it is quite natural that they should be. For that reason, the geographer also should direct his attention to the useful rather than to what is famous and charming. The same principle holds good in regard to history and the mathematical sciences. For in these branches also, that which is useful and more trustworthy should always be given precedence. Most of all, it seems to me, we need, as I have said, geometry and astronomy for a subject like geography. And the need of them is real indeed, for without such methods as they offer it is not possible to accurately determine our geometric figures, climatia, dimensions, and the other cognate things. But just as these sciences prove for us in other treatises all that has to do with the measurement of the earth as a whole, and as I must in this treatise take for granted and accept the propositions proved there, so I must take for granted that the universe is spheroidal, and that the earth's surface is spheroidal. And what is more, I must take for granted the law that is prior to these two principles, namely that the bodies tend towards the center, and I need only indicate, in brief and a summary way, whether a proposition comes, if it really does, within the range of sense perception, or of intuitive knowledge. Take, for example, the proposition that the earth is a sphere. Whereas the suggestion of this proposition comes to us immediately from the law that bodies tend towards the center and that each body inclines towards its own center of gravity. The suggestion comes immediately from the phenomena observed at sea and in the heavens. For our sense perception and also our intuition can bear testimony in the latter case. For instance, it is obvious the curvature of the sea that prevents sailors from seeing distant lights that are placed on a level with their eyes. At any rate, if the lights are elevated above the level of the eyes, they become visible, even though they are at a greater distance from the eyes. And similarly, if the eyes themselves are elevated, they see what was before invisible. This fact is noted by Homer also, for such is the meaning of the words, with a quick glance ahead, being upborne on a great wave, he saw the land very near. So also, when sailors are approaching the land, the different parts of the shore become revealed progressively, more and more, and what at first appeared to be low-lying land gradually grows higher and higher. Again, the revolution of the heavenly bodies is evident on many grounds, but is particularly evident from the phenomena of the sundial. And from these phenomena our intuitive judgment itself suggests that no such revolution could take place if the earth were rooted to an infinite depth.